So Elon Musk recently came out and spoke at the Qatar Economic Forum, and I checked, and it isn't the same thing as the World Economic Forum. So you can put your pitchforks down and stop coming for me for just a moment, please. Basically, he gave a 20-minute long interview. I will link to that full interview in the description down below for anyone who wants to see it. And it's quite interesting. There were some interesting things said. Elon spoke a little bit about Tesla and its operations into the future. He spoke about the recession very briefly, and then he mentioned some stuff about the Twitter deal as well. Now, I've gone through and I've selected what I think are the important bits or the best bits, and I'll very quickly show you to them there, and then I'll give you some context or add my thoughts afterwards. So let's just get right into this today.
What about the general state of the economy? Does that weigh on you when you think about this? I mean, you just described it. You have a super bad feeling about the economy. Are you still in that position? I just said to you earlier, Joe Biden has just come out and said that a recession in America is not inevitable. How do you feel about the economy?
Well, I think a recession is inevitable at some point. As to whether there is a recession in the near term, I think that is more likely than not. It certainly isn't. It's not a certainty, but it appears more likely than not. And what do you think?
I'm with you. I agree with you. I think it's more likely. Can I ask you one particular thing to do with the Twitter bid, which is, you are one of the biggest and fastest growing investors in China. Tesla, you've talked about it being a third of your sales going forward. You're now buying Twitter, the kind of public forum for free speech. The Chinese historically don't tend to be very enthusiastic about free speech. Are you worried about whether you can keep those two particular horses running? Is buying Twitter going to get you in trouble with the Chinese?
Well, Twitter does not operate in China. Yes. So, and I think China does not attempt to interfere with the free speech of the press in the U.S. As far as I know, because I assume you're not under pressure at Bloomberg from China. So I think there's I don't think this is going to be an issue.
So no surprise there that Elon actually thinks that a recession is likely. He came on record and said that actually at the start of the year back in 2021, right at the end in December. So of course, he's only got more entrenched in that view as economic data has continued to deteriorate. Of course, he's also right that it isn't actually inevitable. I personally think we have a 90 or 95% likelihood of a recession. So I'm probably a little bit more bearish than he is. But of course, no one knows 100% for sure what is actually going to happen into the future. Now, what was interesting there, what Elon spoke about, is this idea that he's a proponent of free speech in the West and on Twitter in particular, but then he actually works very closely with the Communist Party in China, which is notoriously ridiculous anti-free speech and actually steps on and destroys people's freedoms and human rights every single day. He was asked very upfront about this in this interview, and he pretty much just skirted around the issue. He said that no, there is no concern with China and free speech. Frankly, I think that's actually a little bit worrying. Elon and Tesla do have very deep ties in China. Of course, they've got the Shanghai Gigafactory, which is very important to Tesla and its revenues and producing its cars. And in order for Elon to get that factory sorted and for it to continue to work when there are lockdowns and COVID, things like that, he has to have a strong relationship with the Communist Party in China. Now, this has always been dodgy. I've never liked this about Elon. I've never liked this about Tesla either. And I still don't like this today. Frankly, I think it's a bit of a stain on Elon's moral character. There's a lot to criticize him for, but apparently most people these days don't seem to focus on the important things like this dealings with China, and they focus instead on his memes that he tweets instead.
Most people, it's very obvious you have changed the car industry in a dramatic way. I'm quite intrigued by one thing, which is your competitors. Where do you see competition coming from? Do you see it coming from the old car makers coming back at you? I just saw a forecast that maybe in a couple of years' time, Volkswagen would be bigger than you in electric cars. Or do you see it coming from new places? Do you believe that or not?
I believe that forecast was from you.
Yes, it was, yeah. And do you agree with that?
I would not agree with that forecast, no.
Do you see people like Volkswagen and General Motors and people like that as the opponents, or do you see people like China, the new Chinese companies? Where do you see the most vibrant competition in electric cars?
I have to say that I am very impressed with the companies and the car companies in China, and just in general with companies in China. I think they're extremely competitive, hardworking, and smart. And I think there's going to be just a massive wave of Chinese products going out into the world. There already are, but you know, for example, I think almost all the iPhones are made in China by contract manufacturers for Apple. But I think we'll see just a large wave of products being exported from China in many industries.
Now, again, he speaks a little bit about China, and this time about how he thinks that our ties are going to continue to integrate with China, and about how China's exports are only going to increase into the future, and how its companies are going to do really well. He speaks about how he thinks his real competitors might be companies like NIO or BYD. He didn't name them themselves, but when he's talking about electric car companies from China as opposed to Europe, those are the kind of companies he means. Frankly, here, I actually disagree with Elon, and not on a moral standing kind of way, more on just a pragmatic kind of way. China has actually always struggled to create domestic companies that can then export into foreign companies. Yes, they make iPhones, but in reality, they're selected for that role purely because they're cheap at what they do. They aren't the people designing iPhones, and they aren't the company that builds that brand up either. And frankly, I don't think China is really capable of that, because the country's foreign policy is just too damn poor. The reason that Weibo is actually a successful company is because Twitter was illegal in China, so there was room for a domestic competitor to evolve and develop. The same can be said for Alibaba and Amazon. The same can be said for BYD and Tesla. Frankly, China's innovation is overstated in my opinion, and it comes from the fact that it's a large enough domestic market while being insular to the outside world. China makes it illegal for competitors to compete in China, so of course they have their own domestic competitors pop up instead. When it comes to exporting to countries like the US and dealing with real brands that actually got there on their own 2 feet, like Apple and Microsoft, frankly, these Chinese companies are going to be in for a world of pain. We have also seen pretty much every major political party in the West take a stand against China and finally recognize that actually it's very difficult to do business with a political party that wants to wipe you off the face of the earth. There's still a very strong chance that actually the COVID pandemic was a bioweapon that leaked out from that lab in Wuhan. It's almost totally ignored these days, but if that's the case, that's 21 million people killed by the Chinese state. That's just been forgotten by a lot of people, but in the long run, this will influence the West and other countries' foreign policy, and I see decoupling trade with China as a very likely outcome over the next few decades, and for that reason, no, frankly, I don't think that China's going to dominate into the future. Now, for the rest of the interview, Elon talks about a few different things. He talks very briefly about cryptocurrency. He talks very briefly about Dogecoin a little bit, about Tesla's robot. Frankly, there was nothing too groundbreaking there. The interview itself actually wasn't brilliant. I don't think the interviewer did a good job at all. He was really just looking for gotcha questions, trying to catch Elon out, and Elon wasn't really having it. I think he dealt with it quite well, to be honest. The important parts of that interview were, though, that the recession is probably coming, that Elon's actually still lightly hopeful for his Twitter deal, and that Tesla and electric cars in general are still going to be growing as an industry into the future. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to bless the YouTube algorithm. It really does help. If you want to join our exclusive community, then check out our Patreon. You get access to our Discord server and extra content like access to my portfolio and buy and sell alerts for all my own investments. Also, make sure to check out the link in the description to Masterworks. It can help you protect your portfolio against market turmoil through fractional shares of art from world-famous artists. Art has historically proven to be uncorrelated to the markets, so it's a really valuable resource with the markets falling every week. There's also a link in the description to I Trust Capital, which helps you to invest in crypto through your tax-advantaged IRA, which could literally save you thousands. If you, like me, think crypto going down is a buy-in opportunity, then now is the perfect time to join I Trust Capital. Thank you all for watching. Stay stoic. Until next time.